The words weren't mine, but they stuck in my head anyway. They'd been printed across the front page of some lifestyle magazine someone had left behind in the waiting area of the repair shop. I was only there to get my old Honda's brakes checked, but for some reason, that headline lingered. Maybe it was because she walked in right then, like some cruel coincidence tying the thought to her. She didn't belong in that kind of place. Not in the grease-slick air, not with the sound of wrenches hitting concrete. She moved with a kind of unbothered grace, even when she set her keys on the counter with a thud harder than it needed to be. The woman had presence, mid-40s, sharp lines softened by something lived in, something heavy. I don't know why I noticed her rings first, or rather, the absence of one. The skin on her finger was pale where a band should have been. My eyes lingered too long before I caught myself. "Long wait today?" she asked me, though she didn't look directly at me. Her voice carried the kind of weight that made you straighten up without realizing. "Oh yeah?" They said maybe an hour. I answered too quickly, too eager. She nodded, only half listening, as if the question was more about filling silence than getting an answer. She pulled a book out of her bag, flipping it open like she'd done it 1,000 times before. But her eyes, they didn't really move along the page. I told myself to look away, but I didn't. Something about her sitting there, back straight, fingers brushing the paper but never turning a page. It made the room feel too quiet. The TV in the corner was on, but I couldn't have told you what was playing. I coughed, just to break the silence. "Good book." Finally, she looked at me. Just a flicker of her eyes, but it was enough to make my stomach twist. "Not really," she said, closing it halfway. Her lips pulled into the ghost of a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. But sometimes holding a book is easier than holding a conversation. I laughed a little too loud. Guess I ruined that strategy then. For a second, I thought I'd overstepped. But then she leaned back, studying me, almost like she was deciding whether I was worth her time. And then, she laughed, just once. Soft, but real. It was stupid, but that single laugh. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The mechanic called my name, breaking whatever thin thread had stretched between us. I stood, fumbling with my jacket, but I couldn't leave without saying something. "You'll probably get your car back before mine," I said, half joking, half hoping she'd answer. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing in that way people do when they see more than you want them to. "Or maybe I'll still be here when you're done." And that was it. She opened her book again, though this time she actually turned the page. I walked to the garage, but my chest felt too tight, my steps uneven. I'd just had the briefest exchange with a woman who seemed like she carried entire worlds in her silence. And the only thing I could think, over and over, was the sound of her laugh, and how it didn't belong in a place like this. I had started dropping by the shop more often than I needed to. Oil change, tire pressure, things I could have handled myself if I'd bothered. But that morning, she was already there, standing near the counter while the clerk typed something on a screen that never seemed to load. Her voice was softer this time, but clipped. "I don't care how long it takes, just call me when it's done." The guy behind the counter nodded without lifting his eyes. She rubbed her temple with 2 fingers, the way people do when they're out of patience but don't want to show it. And maybe I shouldn't have said anything, but the words were out before I could stop them. "Rough day." She turned, slowly, like she had to remind herself who I was. Her eyes narrowed slightly, then softened. Recognition, reluctant, but there. "You again," she said. Not unkindly, but not warm either. I shrugged, trying for casual. "Guess we're both cursed with bad cars." Her lips twitched, almost a smile, though she bit it back. "Or bad choices," she said, quiet, as if to herself. There was something in the way she said it, like the words carried more than she intended. I didn't press, though every nerve in me wanted to. Instead, I gestured toward the coffee machine in the corner. "You want one?" I was going to grab one. She hesitated. A small thing. Her eyes flicked down to her hands, then back to me. Finally, she nodded. "Black. No sugar." I brought the cups over, setting one in front of her. She didn't drink right away, just wrapped her hands around it, like she needed the heat more than the caffeine. Her nails were short, not polished. I don't know why that detail stuck, but it did. You don't talk much, do you? I asked after a stretch of silence. Her brow lifted. I talk, just not when I don't need to. Fair. I sipped my coffee, though it tasted burnt. Guess I make up for it. This time, she did smile. A real one, small but unguarded. It lasted only a second before she caught herself and looked away. I pretended not to notice, though it made something in me tighten. There was a pause. Her shoulders dropped, like she'd let go of something invisible. And when she spoke again, her voice was softer. My husband used to say that, she murmured, that I never talked enough. I almost asked more, but then she shook her head, like she regretted saying it. She raised the cup and finally drank. The mechanic called her name. She stood, careful not to meet my eyes. I thought that was it, that she'd walk away without another word. But at the door, she stopped, turned just slightly, her voice low. Thanks. For the coffee. And then she was gone. I sat there a while longer, staring at the cup she'd left behind, her fingerprints faint against the white paper. Somehow, it felt heavier than anything I could have said. I'd gone back to the shop late, after work, to pick up my car. The sky had opened up on my walk there, sheets of water drumming the pavement. By the time I stepped inside, drenched and dripping onto the tile, she was already there, sitting with that same book, unread as ever, resting in her lap. Guess we're both cursed, I said, shaking my hair out like a dog. She didn't look up right away. When she did, her eyes lingered longer than usual. You'll ruin the floor. Better the floor than me. It got a laugh, quiet, but enough to make the storm outside feel less loud. The mechanic had closed up early, leaving only the two of us in the waiting room. The hum of the fluorescent lights mixed with the rain hammering against the windows. It felt like the world had been reduced to just this room, just her. You live close? I asked, more to fill the space than anything. Close enough. Too far in this weather. She shifted slightly, tucking her legs beneath her chair. I should have called someone. I just didn't. There was something in the way she said it, like she wasn't talking about the storm at all. I wanted to ask who she would have called, who she used to call. But I stayed quiet, afraid that if I pushed, she'd shut down again. Instead, I pulled off my damp hoodie and draped it over the back of the chair between us. The room smelled faintly of oil and wet fabric, and beneath it, something softer. Her perfume, faint but lingering. We sat there, closer than before. She tapped her thumb against the closed book, restless. I noticed how tired her eyes looked in the fluorescent light. Not from age, just from carrying something invisible too long. Sometimes I think, she said suddenly, voice low, that people don't really change. They just hide better. I turned toward her. The words were too sharp to be casual, too heavy to throw away. Do you believe that? She looked at me then, fully. For the first time, it felt like she was letting me see her without the guard. Her lips parted, like she might answer, but then, her phone buzzed. The sound sliced through the quiet. She glanced down at the screen, face tightening before she turned it face down on the table. She didn't answer. We sat in silence, the storm pounding harder. I wanted to reach across, to cover her restless hand with mine, to ask who it was. Instead, I bit the inside of my cheek and said nothing. Her shoulders rose, then fell, like she was bracing against something no one could see. She leaned back, exhaled, and whispered, "It never stops, does it?" I didn't know what she meant, but I nodded anyway. And in that moment, when her eyes flicked to my mouth and back again, I thought she might close the distance between us. My pulse stuttered, and I leaned just slightly forward without meaning to. But she stood. Too quickly. I should go, she said, gathering her bag, her book pressed flat against her chest like a shield. And before I could respond, she was at the door, her silhouette blurred against the glass, the storm swallowing her whole. I sat frozen, heart hammering, every muscle screaming from the restraint of what almost happened. No storm this time, no excuse to blame the atmosphere. Just the two of us, side by side at a table in the corner of a half-empty diner. Our plates pushed away, coffee cups cooling between us. I hadn't meant for it to be dinner. I'd only offered to help carry her things after she'd picked up her car. Somehow, it became a booth, a menu, the clink of silverware. Somehow it became this. She stirred her coffee long after the sugar had dissolved, spoon circling slow, never touching the sides. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally, I said, we keep running into each other. Her eyes flicked up, then back down. Or maybe we don't stop ourselves. The words landed like a weight. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. Can I ask you something? You already do, she said softly. I swallowed, suddenly unsure. But the question pressed at my chest until it forced itself out. What are we doing? She froze. The spoon stilled in her cup. Her hand trembled. Just once, barely noticeable, before she set it down carefully, like the smallest movement might shatter everything. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were sharper than I'd ever seen them. We're pretending. Pretending what? That this is harmless. That it doesn't matter. Her voice cracked, just slightly, before she caught herself. I didn't answer right away. My throat was too dry, my heart too loud. I wanted to tell her it did matter. That every look, every silence between us had already crossed some invisible line. But I just sat there, staring back, while she forced a steady breath. You're too young, she whispered. Not dismissive, just raw, like it hurt her to say it. And you're... I started, then stopped. Not old. Not broken. Just her. But I didn't have the right words. Her lips pressed into a tight line, her gaze holding mine longer than it should have. Neither of us moved. The diner's neon light flickered against the window, humming faintly, as if the world had shrunk down to this unbearable pause. I wanted to reach across the table. She wanted me to stay exactly where I was. We both knew it. She exhaled, shoulders sagging, and said the one thing that left me hollow. You remind me of everything I lost. It was late, close to midnight, when my phone lit up with her name. I almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail, because just hearing her voice in that hour felt dangerous. But I did. Hello. Her breath was uneven. You're awake. I sat up in bed, heart thudding. Yeah. What's wrong? Silence. Too long. Then, softly, nothing's wrong. I didn't want to be alone with it tonight. I didn't know what it was, but I stayed quiet. Do you still have the car? She asked suddenly, almost businesslike, as if pulling herself back behind a curtain. Yeah. What? Could you meet me? Just for a minute. There's something I should show you. The street was nearly empty when I pulled up. She was waiting outside her building, coat wrapped tight, hair loose around her face. No makeup, no armor. She looked real. Inside, her apartment was tidy, but not lived-in tidy. Tidy like someone who kept things controlled so they wouldn't spill over. She motioned me toward the table. On it sat a stack of photographs, edges curled, colors faded. She hovered above them, hands trembling as she nudged one forward. The photo showed a man, maybe late 30s, smiling awkwardly at the camera. Beside him was her, years younger, lighter somehow. Between them, a little boy grinning with a toy car in his hand. That's my husband, she said finally. And my son. My throat tightened. I didn't know you. I don't talk about them. She cut me off gently. Her eyes stayed fixed on the photo. The boy, Daniel. He died when he was 8. Car accident. Wrong place, wrong time. Her hand lingered on the edge of the photo, then pulled back quickly, as though it burned. My husband, he blamed me. Said if I'd been watching him closer, if I'd done one thing differently. Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. And the thing is, I blame me too. I still do. I didn't know what to say. Words felt useless. I just sat there, staring at the photo of the boy with the toy car, feeling something heavy coil in my chest. Finally, she looked at me. Really looked. You remind me of him. Not in the obvious ways. Just the way you laugh at things that aren't funny. The way you don't hide it when you're nervous. Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell. Being around you feels like standing in a room I swore I'd never enter again. The words left me unsteady, like the floor had shifted. I wanted to reach for her, to anchor her somehow. But I didn't. Couldn't. Instead, I whispered the only thing that felt true. Then why let me in? She didn't answer. Just slid the photo back into the stack, turned it face down, and whispered, almost to herself, because I don't know how to stop. It was late again, but not by accident this time. She'd asked me to come. No pretense. No excuse about cars or errands. Just, if you're not busy, maybe stop by. Her apartment was dimly lit, a single lamp throwing soft shadows across the room. The photographs from before were gone, the table cleared, as if she couldn't bear to leave the past staring back at her. We sat on the couch, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel the weight of her breathing. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, pressing, like both of us were waiting for the other to make it easier. Finally, she broke it. I don't know how to do this. Her voice was raw, stripped of all the sharpness she usually carried. Neither do I admitted. My hands twisted together in my lap. But maybe we don't have to know. Maybe it's just this. She turned toward me slowly. Her face looked softer in the low light. Lines I hadn't noticed before, tired but honest. She studied me the way you study something fragile, as if deciding whether touching it would break it. This isn't supposed to happen, she whispered. I know. My chest felt tight, every word weighted. But it already has. Her eyes shone, not with tears, exactly, but something close. She let out a shaky breath, then leaned back against the couch, her shoulder brushing mine. The contact was so slight it could have been accidental. It wasn't. I didn't move. Neither did she. Minutes passed that way, the air heavy with everything we weren't saying. My hand twitched once against my leg, and then, slowly, hers found it. Not a grab, not even a real hold. Just her fingers resting lightly over mine, like testing if the world would collapse if she allowed herself that much. It didn't collapse. We stayed like that, side by side, silent, her hand warm against mine. And for the first time, it felt less like something forbidden and more like something inevitable. Like the space we'd been circling for weeks had finally, quietly, closed. No confessions. No promises. Just her thumb brushing once, absent-mindedly, across my skin. The clock ticked, the lamp hummed, and she let her head fall gently against my shoulder. I exhaled, slow, careful, as if breathing too loudly might break it. And in that stillness, in that fragile quiet, I understood. This was the answer. Not words, not declarations. Just the two of us, sitting in the aftermath of everything we'd fought against, finally too tired to pretend we could keep resisting. She closed her eyes, and with a voice so faint I almost didn't hear it, she whispered the line that sealed it. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. Looking back, I don't know if there was ever a single moment where it became clear. It wasn't a lightning strike, or a grand confession, or even the night she let her hand rest on mine. It was slower than that, softer, like two people circling the same truth until, eventually, we were too tired to keep circling. I think about her laugh sometimes, that very first one in the repair shop. Small, almost reluctant, but it cut through me in a way I didn't understand then. I think about the coffee she didn't drink, the book she never read, the photos she couldn't keep on the table. All of it, fragments that added up to something bigger. She once told me I reminded her of everything she lost. And for a while, I thought that meant I was only a shadow in her life, something temporary she'd regret later. But over time, I realized it wasn't about replacing or filling a void. It was about reminding her that she was still here, that she could still be seen, still be wanted, not in spite of her cracks, but because of them. And me? I used to think I was just young, just curious, maybe even reckless. But she made me pay attention in ways I never had before. To silence, to restraint, to the weight of another person's pain. She made me realize that love, real love, isn't about grand gestures. It's about being the one who stays in the room when silence feels unbearable. We never defined what we were. We didn't need to. What mattered was that she stopped looking over her shoulder for what she'd lost, and I stopped rushing toward some future I didn't understand. We met in the middle, right there, in the quiet. And if there's one thing I carry from it, it's this. Sometimes love doesn't look the way you expect. Sometimes it's not fireworks. It's a quiet collapse into something you can't name, but you can't deny either. I don't know where we'll end up tomorrow, or next month, or a year from now. But for the first time, that uncertainty doesn't scare me. Because the point isn't knowing how the story ends. It's knowing you've stopped pretending you don't care how it begins. So if this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?